Hello everyone and welcome back to European Universalist 4. I'm Lord Formand here with another country guide. This time the country we're doing is England into Great Britain. Great Britain of course is the probably strongest naval power in the game and one of the historical winners for the EU4 time frame. In fact, they go on to, form the British Empire, which doesn't collapse until after World War II, honestly. And part of the mission tree for both England and Great Britain is to recreate that empire. However, there are several decisions one has to make fairly early on in the game as England. One of the big ones to deal with is what to do with France. So, French and English at this point have been involved in the 100 Years' War for quite some time, with a event, a mission and sort of event for both England and France called the Surrender of Maine. So there's hostilities. These guys have been at war for close to 100 years. It has ended recently with a truce that requires England to hand over Maine to France. However, England may not wish to do so. So one of the first things to consider is England is, are you going to contest your French lands? Are you going to go for a land empire in Europe, or are you going to retreat to your island and become just a naval trading colonial power? Both are viable strategies. Obviously, conquering France will keep you almost, I think it's like 80 or so development, all told. And it will give you all the French development in the long run if you go for the whole French conquest. Because once you're at war with France, you can do a permanent claim on Ile-de-France. And then if you do more of this, you do the 100 Years' War, you get control of Paris, you get a claim to force union on France. If you force union on France, then you can do this mission as well. So basically you can get a union over France within the first 30 years of the game at most. It's very fun. I've done it. It leads you to becoming one of the larger powerhouses on the continent, especially if you don't integrate France for quite some time. You just kind of leave them there, keep them happy, and they'll fight most of your European wars for you, which there are some other ones they want you to do, like invade, Picardy, West Burgundy, Provence, etc. They want you to do a fair amount of conquest in Europe. Mission tree. Other choice is to surrender Maine's, probably end up at war with France and have to give up the rest of these, or you can simply return them. Really up to you. If you return them, you're giving AI France a huge boost. On the other hand, their ability to get past your Royal Navy of 6 heavy ships and 18 transports on day 1 of the game is severely limited. England's got half decent ideas, a little bit more militarized, but when you swap to Great Britain, you tend to get really, really good naval ideas, which I will go over. So the English ideas: National 1 unrest and 10% infantry combat ability. This is something that people don't really understand. This infantry combat ability actually makes your troops stronger than France's at the beginning of the game. While the French king is an inspiring leader, you get 5 morale. If you hire a 5 morale or a discipline leader, 10 morale or a discipline leader, you'll have 5 better morale or 5 discipline more. And the irony is your troops are actually better one-on-one than the French troops, which means winning the 100 Years' War has actually gotten easier as England. When I was doing my French guide, which I just did, and you should check out, I did several test runs as France, and I actually struggled winning the 100 Years' War because of how strong the English army is early on, and the fact that France has very little manpower. So, the question is, what can you do about it? There's several options what you can do about it. I don't think I'm going to be able to show them all here, but I'll explain what they are. So, first off, you can let the Surrender of Maine events fire, where you either hand over Maine or you fight for it. Now, if you hand it over, there'll be a peace treaty for X amount of years. France will get significantly stronger, get their manpower up, get their army up, get allies. The odds of you surviving the second war and winning on the continent get significantly harder. On the other hand, it will give you a chance to invade Ireland and everything else, and even Scotland if France ever removes their guarantee. So you can do that move, try and wait, delay it longer, or the other option is you start the fight with France early. So normally you'd have to fabricate a claim. However, France, or one of the French vassals here, owns, I'm going to get it wrong, Armagnac, probably Armagnac, which is a English core province, which means you can declare a reconquest war for that. And because it's a French vassal, it'll call in all the call in France and all their other people. It will call in Provence though, which makes the war significantly harder. But if you go to war over Maines, you're going to attack France, so France will get all their allies anyway. So one solution is to attack France by allying somebody like Castile. Aragon, maybe, if you can get them. Ideally, you get Burgundy, because Burgundy really hates France. In this case, they've rivaled me. So there is a chance that you get Burgundy as an ally. If you get Burgundy as an ally, the war goes significantly easier, because Burgundy and their unions contribute a significant amount of troops to the battle and will draw off the French attention. And then the issue is, how do you get them to join you in the war? Well, you attack and you offer them land. That's basically the solution. You may have to give up, like, this province to Castile, maybe one of these two to Aragon, maybe one of these to Burgundy. You can always reconquer it later. The big goal is to get control of Paris by starting the war, taking this mission, and getting the permanent claims on this region. You take it, then you progress down to forcing a union. Another option is allying yourself to Brittany. Brittany, in my experience, doesn't tend to like France. They're another potential one you can get, especially if you offer them like one of Provence's lands. Another option is you actually attack Provence, but for that you need to fabricate a claim. But then you can almost definitely call Brittany in. Might not be able to get Burgundy though. So, one way or another. However, if you're going to do that, the first thing you got to do is put John Talbot, who's actually a really good general. He's about equivalent to what the French has. You're going to want to use him. And then you're going to want to move him and the other army, which you might want to put a leader in, over the continent. In this case, let's see, Henry, despite being an absolutely abysmal ruler, is not a bad fire general if fire only mattered at this time period. And then you have a chance of winning that. I'm not going to do much more explanation on that, just because that's a whole long, convoluted thing. Basically, I've already explained what you have to do. It's a matter of trial and retrial until you get it right. So, you'll notice that England starts with a disaster. We have the War of the Roses. Ruling dynasty is not York. Stability less than 1. And then the ruler diplomacy skill is, or admin and military skill is horrible. So you can stop it by having an heir of the following dynasty: York, Lancaster, Plantagenet, Regency, or a lesser part in a personal union. Once you get it, though, you get 5 unrest, but you get 12.5% extra mercenary manpower, which, if you save up the money to afford mercenaries, actually gives you a pretty capable way of winning that war. Suffice to say, you want to avoid the disaster. I spoke a little bit about how annoying the Castilian Civil War was for Castile. The War of the Roses is arguably worse than the Castilian Civil War, because you've got spread out territories, and the War of the Roses, sometimes the rebels will pop up in those territories, which means then you have to sail around fighting rebels. They also spawn with significantly a large amount of troops in their series of events, giving them more troops, more unrest, more revolts. Ending the disaster takes a while. Once you're done, though, you get a chance to get Henry Tudor on the throne. If you want to follow the historical path, you put him on the throne. The interesting thing is, if you have an heir, I've gotten some really good heirs, you have a chance to replace your really good heir with Henry Tudor, who's not bad. I think he's like a 2-4-1 or something. I could be wrong. He's pretty good, considering England's going to have no monarch points for a long time. Another thing you're going to want to do is focus military power. You really need to get to Miltech 4, especially if you have any hope of beating France. Diplotech is nice because it keeps your navy strong, but there's no real major naval upgrades early on that you really need. You're not going to get improved morale till 7, trade efficiency till 5. You're not going to get better ships for level 9, so you really don't need better of a navy. However, you are going to want to keep an eye on your navy. Strongest navy, I think, at game start. The exception might be the Ming or the Venetian Navy offhand, but in terms of ocean warfare, you're probably the strongest because you have heavies. So those are your options starting out. The other option is to stay, give up all that land, and focus on the British Isles, in which case Ireland should be your first goal of conquest. Ireland, a lot of these people start out with 5 troops. Usually the AI will disband its way down to 1 or 2. It basically means you can freely rampage your way across Ireland. I would recommend going over here to Thormund, who has core creation cost, and trying to vassalize them, because you can vassalize virtually anyone in Ireland early on. And once you vassalize them, feed them the other lands. You might want to go through and check to see all of the different Irish ideas, because some of them are pretty good, and see which one you prefer to use. I prefer to use the cheaper core creation cost. That way they actually core it at a reasonable speed, become productive, and then you can annex them later. Really up to you. You could go with these guys, get extra production efficiency if for some reason you want more money from your vassal. You really shouldn't need to worry about it though. England makes plenty of money from the English Channel trade node. You're getting 8 gold from trade. You can get up in the 500-600s by mid to late game. It's ridiculous. Scotland, on the other hand, presents slightly bit of a problem. If you give up all your land in France, conquering Scotland ironically becomes easier, because then when you declare war on Scotland, all you have to do is stop the French from crossing the Channel, which, using your navy, if you keep an eye on it, is not particularly hard. And then you won't lose all the war score from France occupying all your forts down here. But you also give up all that development. But you can go after Scotland and do a lot of damage. You've got this mission here, Levy the Troops, manpower 60, total army size 100% of force limit. If you do that, you get a subjugation CB on Scotland, and you get permanent claims on all their lands. So why do you get a subjugation? Well, historically, England and Scotland obviously formed the United Kingdom, or part of it. The reality is, in some ways, the Scots won because James the Fourth of Scotland became James the First of England, but it was England definitely over time grew to dominate Scotland, being richer and larger and more populated. But you can basically force them into a vassalage, or there's an event, I've never really gotten it, where you can get a union between the two. I'd honestly go to make them your vassal, and then once you do that, you get Conquer Scotland, and you get all these bonuses with more claims on the Isles up here. It's the issue I find is Scotland is large. It's actually over 100 war score province, which means vassalizing them in the first war, I don't think you can do it. It might have changed with the Emperor update. I haven't done initial invasion of Scotland. In fact, the one game I've played of England, Scotland collapsed due to rebels, which was kind of hilarious to see Gaeldom emerge up here, and the Norwegians invaded. It was weird. So I'd advise you to take a couple provinces and then subjugate them. It's up to you guys. If you can pull it off, good. If you can't, 2 wars, then you subjugate them. The reason that is important is because you can form the British nation 2 different ways, sort of like how you can form Spain. You can form it militarily by owning Lothian and Aberdeen, and then you just click this button once you hit Admin Tech 10 and you get it. Or you can form it diplomatically. Basically, once you have Scotland the subject of England, you can click that button, you immediately inherit or annex Scotland, and you form Great Britain. This is actually the easier and better way to do it, if you can pull it off, because then you present everything, and you also have Scotland's army to help you invade Ireland, which helps. So, outside of that, now that we've talked about the starting moves, what are the next things to do? Oh, what a shocker. Build a Maritime Empire. I would not advise going down this route early on. Basically, have a ton of ports, build a large navy. It wants you to go invade Gibraltar, or better known as Gibraltar, the English-speaking worlds. If you do that, you're going to draw the ire of Castile, Aragon, Spain, or Portugal. So, might be something to do once you're the largest and most powerful great nation rather than a weak one. Besides, once you do that, the next missions are basically invade the Western Mediterranean. So beat up Aragon, take these islands, get Malta, keep going, with the goal of invading Alexandria. Unless the Ottomans have a really bad start, that's going to put you into conflict with the Ottomans early on. So a better strategy is to delay going down this tree a bit. Yeah. Also, there's War of the Roses here, which is nice because it reduces your aggressive expansion impact. So try to use that when you're like conquering lots of France, conquering all of Scotland, conquering most of Ireland. Gives you for 15 years, which is a really nice bonus. This is, you can't be Catholic. You can go Anglican or you can go Protestant. People will say Anglican's rather weak, and it is in some areas, but you basically have infinite money. But as England, you should have infinite money from trade anyway. So Protestantism's probably stronger on England. And then it keeps you going down the empire, blah, 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 blah. I will point out this one here, the Angevin Kingdom. If you control quite a large amount of France, you can do this one, which gives Anjou, currently by Provence and their capital, pretty nice, cheaper development costs and everything else. Basically, it gives you a military base in France to build up your armies, land and recruitment time. Plus, you can develop Anjou to be like 30 or 40 development without much issue. Figured I'd point that out. So, if you're going to stay in Great Britain, or you are going to delay trying to invade the rest of Europe, which you should do, you should go down the colonial path. Basically, discover the Americas, settle the Americas, colonize the Caribbean. 13 colonies is really the only really unique one to England. Basically, you get 15 in colonial Eastern America, 13 colonies. Liberate desire and subjects -10 till the end of the game. That is really strong. First off, it'll help you keep control of your subjects, your colonial ones. And if you've got a union over France and other people, it will also help reduce that liberty desire as well, which means much easier to have lots of subjects is Great Britain, England, which is a little unusual because I don't think England was particularly known for having a lot of super strong vassals, unlike France. So, once you do that, it wants you to go after controlling the trade in the English Channel and renovating Oxbridge. So that's kind of cool. Also, it's going to also ask you to build manufactories. So England, center of the Industrial Revolution, first off, starts off with a fair amount of coal, which is kind of interesting because no other nation in the game really has that level of coal. In fact, some places like the Ottomans have no coal at all. Outside of that, you're going to find a lot of coal in Germany, barely any in France. What's this mean? This basically means that late game, you can become an industrialized powerhouse like everyone else. Once you get 20 manufactories, you can build manufactories, local goods, you get 3 production and manpower places. You get some really crazy boosts here. Once you get all furnaces, get all that coal going, you get 9 development in London. That is ridiculous. Outside of this, you got other missions: discover India and control the Hansa, which this actually is probably the hardest part of completing the English Great Britain mission tree. Trying to invade these areas is going to bring you into conflict with the HRE because Riga and these tend not to. Riga's easy, but Lubeck and stuff are going to stay in the HRE unless it gets dissolved, which means war with the Emperor, so probably Austria. Isn't that exciting? Outside of that, we should point out the fact that England has an endgame trade node, the English Channel. However, it does not get all the trade from the New World. Some of the South American ones, it's actually slightly tricky to steer trade to the English Channel. In fact, some of it you have to steer through Bordeaux and then Champagne to get to the English Channel. However, you do have one ally in steering trade to the English Channel, and this is unusual, but if they form, you actually have a trade ally in the Netherlands. They will compete with you for trade, but once they get colonies, which if they form the Netherlands, they tend to colonize, they'll pull a fair amount of trade there as well. Early on, though, trying to get some trade control in Lubeck and pull it on is pretty good, because Lubeck tends to be a pretty rich trade node early game, and then they die off later game. But still, it's really good, which means trade ideas in England, late game, this makes your income insane. You shouldn't really need to, though. In terms of ideas, though, let's just quick down that. I mentioned trade. That's a mid to late game idea. What should you take early on? Well, if you're going for a war with France, probably defensive. The 15% morale bonus is going to come in really handy, especially if you're worried about France getting Elan. However, France should not get Elan before you conquer them unless you're moving really slow. And this will just make your army that much stronger. Between 10 infantry combat and 15 morale, plus any military advisors, you'll probably have one of the strongest armies in the game. You start off with the third strongest military army, which is strange, in my opinion, for England at this point, but it makes sense considering you're the third ranked great power. You're actually larger than the Ottomans. So that's one option. Another option is to pick something along the lines of an admin tech. You could do administrative ideas, basically. You do admin ideas because if you're going to invade Europe, you're going to be conquering a lot of development land, and the 25% cheaper cost is really handy. You could also go economic because England starts off and keeps for the rest of the game. I don't know why I said that. There's a lot of good, simple terrain here. They've got a lot of farmlands. They have a lot of grasslands. They can develop pretty high. The worst thing they have is woods and a hill. Really not an opposition to development. 20% development at the end of economic ideas just basically means you can build the islands as tall as you want. This is the strategy you want. This is the idea you want to take and the strategy you want to pursue if you're going to abandon your French lands, because otherwise you're never going to have as much development as France and they're going to want wars with you. Do that, you can keep up with them. For your second idea group, you want to do exploration ideas. Now, you're probably not going to be able to reach the New World until you get to colonial range, the improvement of colonial range at 115 on Diplotech. But it's worth getting a start on that, because getting to your third where you get plus 50% colonial range, stack those two, you can start reaching the New World. You probably want to pursue the Caribbean first. Try and get a colonial nation down there, because that is one of the nexuses of trade in the New World. A lot of trade steers to there and then out. You really do want that. After that, definitely go for the 13 colonies. That 10% cheaper Liberty Desire, or 10 reduced Liberty Desire for the rest of the game is really, really good. Wish it was on more countries. Once you focus on that, the next third idea should probably be expansion. The reason if you're staying on the British Isles you don't really need a military idea is you're not going to be really fighting anyone who can fight you. You're going to be keeping everyone off your isles with your navy, and Scotland can't match you. Like, they really can't. You can build like twice or 2.5 times larger army and just conquer them. The only danger they have is if France sends troops, in which case don't neglect your navy. You can actually build more heavy ships at the start of the game. I would recommend keeping like 10 heavy ships, putting them on hunt enemy fleets there, and basically just create the wooden wall, which the British have. So that deserves a mention. The British from the Rule of Britannia have the wooden wall. Naval combat bonus off own coast +1. Basically means that as long as you're bordering your lands, but if you abandon France, it's going to be your British Isles, your ships perform 1 better in all dice rolls, which is really strong. It's basically a terrain bonus at sea. Really powerful. You'd have to pay a fair amount of money for it, like 200-300 gold, but you should definitely take that once you get the chance. The only other one you might want to take is the ship trade power, if you really want to dominate the English trade node with light ships, but this is a stronger one if you're trying to be defensive. And after you start colonizing, the world's kind of your oyster. Making your way to India early on and invading there is entirely possible as England. Fighting over colonies, you've got a lot of options. England can kind of just sit happily quiet up here on the British Isles, build up their development, build up their colonial empire, and then really explode on the scene with warfare. So we're going to take a cut here, and we're going to jump over to... Actually, no, we're not going to jump to Great Britain. First, I'll go over Parliament, because it's worth mentioning. So the British start off with the British monarchy, which or the English monarchy, which has a nice bonus of national one unrest plus legitimacy and plus governing capacity with the penalty towards absolutism, which makes sense because the English kingdom had to answer to the parliament. This is the whole Magna Carta issue. There is an event later on where you get a civil war with Cromwell and all that if you wanted to abolish the English monarchy and go for like a republic. I would honestly think the English monarchy is worth keeping. Basically, you get the parliamentary reform at the start of the game, which has both its benefits and its weaknesses. So you actually don't have the nobility estate, which puts you in a relatively weaker position militarily than most nations. You can't get the 1 monthly military power from nobility, but you also are lacking the manpower recovery, which means you have to use parliament. So parliament, you can do debates and you can pass it. You can get stuff like development in lands, extra colonists. I like the bonus to morale. This one's really good. Gain loyalty, especially if you want to add privileges and then revoke them. To start out, though, the first things you should do is definitely give over some of your monopolies, seize some land. You want to try and get, obviously, up to like 40, then pass the monthly 1 Diplo power and then monthly 1 admin power. I'd probably go for the Diplo power first because you're England and keeping a strong navy is going to be key to your survival. You've got 10 infantry combat ability and a yearly naval tradition to start, followed by production, and then diplomatic relations. These are all incentivizing you to use Diplo ideas. I'm not really going to go over the rest of these because you should switch to Great Britain before you get to them. And on that note, we are going to jump to Great Britain. Okay, here we are, Great Britain. This is just one of the later starts of the game. I think this is the 1718 one. So, changes to the mission tree. You'll notice there are more missions now because Great Britain has more missions. You've got conquer the North Sea Islands, settle the North, basically go for like Greenland and colonize it. Let's see, is anything else up there? No. Moving down, you've got stuff like control electors. Try and get election to become Holy Roman Emperor, or vassalize them. If you do manage to become Emperor of the HRE, you can get Prestige Decay and Imperial Growth Authority. You need to kill off the HRE, or you can proclaim Emperor Kaisertum to do that as well, or you can just become Emperor. Honestly, easier. Further down that, you've got missions now to grow the channel to the highest valued trade node, which isn't hard, but you get 25% trade efficiency. That is really, really strong. Just jumping to this one, England is or Great Britain is getting 56 gold per trade from trade already. That's just crazy. Outside of that, you have missions to invade and conquer India. You've got conquer Bengal, which if you form Great Britain as soon as you can, it's actually not that hard to do all this stuff. And then you invade, you get more claims, you invade even more, you get even more claims, you take mainland India, you get even more. Take northern India, you get even more. Basically, you get permanent claims to conquer India, which by the time you get there and incapable of sending a force, you're strong enough to pull it off. I will point out that just on this start alone, Great Britain has 707 development, mainly just from their homelands and obviously colonies and stuff. 556. So they're about 300 development. So they've only grown 200 development after they've lost their lands. But that's with the AI playing it. None of these provinces have been developed. This is 24 to develop this. It's why the AI doesn't develop it, I don't know. Basically, part of the reason for that is they got the economic ideas. So, the British ideas are very different than the English. You get morale of navies, heavy ship combat ability, and if you finish it, you get yearly 1 naval tradition, all of which is basically saying, have a large, have a very large, have a very, very large, very powerful navy. Then you've got governing capacity plus 10 from the Acts of Union, and diplomatic annexation cost negative 15. This is quite handy if you've got an Irish vassal lying around, or if you're using vassals elsewhere, like, I don't know, integrating France or something. Then you get settler increase plus 20, the city upon a hill. It's nice if you still got land to settle in the New World, which there probably will be, because the 13 colonies have yet to basically take over North Carolina at this point in history, which obviously as a human player you'd probably colonize sooner. Then you get global tariffs plus 15, really incentivizing you for that colonial nation game. Negative 5 tech cost, it's really nice. It's a little bit later in the game, but still should keep you saving monarch points and ahead in tech. 5% discipline, which is really good. Reform of commission buying, which is, it leads to officers who actually have a rough idea about what they're doing. It's good. Early industrialization is one of the strongest ideas in the British trade. Plus 20% goods produced modifier is crazy strong. Most nations get 10, they get 20. It's doubling of that bonus that you get as England. It basically means your lands are going to be very rich and very productive. Then you have Britannia rules the waves, that song. Able maneuver, blockade efficiency, and marines. So not many countries get marines. Great Britain is one of them. That stacks really well with all your naval stuff. If you want to go completely overkill like the AI does, you basically take naval ideas and your navy and your admirals start to become really good for the rest of the game. As you can see, 18 heavy ships. They can basically just put this guy on hunt enemy fleets in the English Channel, and they really don't have to deal with anyone getting across. Outside of that, there are other stuff. In this case, the England went Protestant, which is odd. It really should be Anglican. I guess they didn't update the bookmark when they added Anglican. Interesting. You can do stuff like found the East India Trade Company. Once you get it, you should do global trade power and a merchant. Why wouldn't you? Really good. You've got all these other ones. It's going to be different if you go Anglican. And if you've taken a lot of these ideas, trade, I don't know why you'd want maritime ideas, but you take some of these, you do trading quality ideas, you get trade efficiency. You do trade and admin, you get another 20%. So you could stack those, get 40. You take the mission one, you're looking at 65% boosted trade efficiency. You start to realize how Great Britain can start making like 600-700 gold from trade, especially if a human's playing it. Because obviously, global trade did not found here. It founded in Amsterdam. The world would be very different if a human was playing it. For example, Austria probably would not be this large, and France probably would have been checked a bit more. They would probably they wouldn't have gotten, or they'd have lost Canada. So for reforms for Great Britain and England, you got the English monarchy. When it comes to second tier, I'd actually go for the strength and noble privileges for the manpower rather than the tax. Just because you don't have the nobility estate for recovery of manpower, so the additional size will just mean you have a larger army, and actually it will increase your replenishment rate somewhat, so it's worth taking. Your bureaucracy, you actually don't need the cultural one if you're not going to expand out of Great Britain. The autonomy one you can take. Basically, once you form Great Britain, you're going to be accepting of Scottish and Welsh cultures, and Irish you can simply embrace as well, especially once you hit empire rank. It becomes even easier. You really don't need extra accepted cultures as England, let's put it that way. For admin, the admin cadre, I would actually go for probably the clergy, but if you're worried about advisor costs, you could go for the burghers as well. For deliberative assembly, you can't take parliamentarism because you already have the English monarchy. So you probably want to go royal decree. If you want to go really crazy, you could go over here and do general estates for 10% production efficiency. You can have some crazy stuff because you got the goods produced, and then if you have production, basically you can become a production powerhouse. Further down, you probably want to go for I am the state, increase your governing capacity, and to end, you probably want to do political absolutism, because Great Britain has a penalty to absolutism as well, just from being the English monarchy. So strengthening that, getting that a little bit higher is going to be more useful than the other bonuses. Admin possible policies, you don't really need it, and you don't want to become a republic or a theocratic government. So I think that's most of everything unique about Great Britain. They have a really powerful mission tree. They have a stupidly powerful navy. So long as you maintain like 10 heavies, and then you just have like 2-3 fleets of them, you can stop basically anyone from landing. I've seen 20 British heavies take on like 100 French heavies and win, inflicting terrible casualties. And in terms of rivals, I should mention it. Rival France, early game, that means their rivals will like you more, so you can sometimes get Burgundy and Steel to help you, or Aragon. Outside of that, you start off the game as England with an alliance with Portugal. You should probably keep that as long as possible. There's really no reason to go against them unless you're looking to dominate the entire New World. So select other rivals. Denmark usually works as a rival. Usually you can pick a rival somewhere else in the HRE. The Commonwealth, Poland's not a bad rival. You're never going to get into a fight with them. Later on, the Ottomans and the Mamelukes are just worth rivaling because you want their land anyway. And once you get to India, if someone like the Mughals form, rival them because it'll make taking their land cheaper. So I think that's everything for Great Britain I can think of offhand. Yeah. Great Britain and England, very fun nation. It's really annoying having to deal with like civil wars and stuff. But actually, I should mention, you give out provinces to Parliament. They get a pretty nice bonus to tax, production, manpower, and sailors. It does increase your absolutism and mean that when you do war debates in Parliament, you have more people to bribe. But really, you should go through and find all your high development provinces or farmlands you're going to develop high, like Scarborough here, give them a state, develop them, and just enjoy the extra bonuses towards making money from them. England is really too strong. The only hard part about the game is the start with France, really. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. Hopefully you guys enjoy playing England and Great Britain. The start is rough. There's really no way around it. They have one of the more annoying starts. You have to make that decision about France from day one, and it shapes your entire gameplay. If you have enjoyed this, do check out my other guides. I just recently did a Castile and France guide, and I'm going to work on probably like a Portugal and some of the other guides later on. So I will see you guys all then. If you haven't done so, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in another video. Bye for now.